This talk is about some of the design consideration. If you want to roll out Spinnaker, from one deployment to enterprise-wide, and some of the requirements, some of the design considerations we were going to talk about is going to address either a single deployment or multiple deployments, but it's still a useful conversation here. So my name is Balaji Siva. I run products at OpsMX, and Gopinath is our CTO at OpsMX. So for people who are not familiar with OpsMX, we are a continuous delivery company. We offer three things. One is the open source Spinnaker support. If you're looking to do Spinnaker and you want to support open source, we do it. We also have an enterprise Spinnaker, which offers a layer of value add on top of the open source Spinnaker. And we also have something called Autopilot, which brings AI or intelligence engine to the CD process. So we are right opposite this door outside. And if you have any questions, you can ask us then. So in this talk, we'll talk about sort of review the enterprise needs we have seen from various customers down the road. We've engaged with a lot of Spinnaker users and asking for what their needs are. And we sort of summarize what the needs are. And then we'll talk about, okay, now that you have the needs ready, how do you go about designing the Spinnaker to meet those needs? And we'll talk about briefly about like how some of the success criteria you want to look at after you've done the deployments. So at the beginning, from a requirements perspective, obviously having a mission, obviously CD is a mission critical for most of you because developers who are deploying in this day and age, developers are deploying all the time, and you want to be able to have highly available, basically a CD. This is generally CD, not specifically Spinnaker. And obviously scale in terms of, particularly if you're rolling out to a large enterprise-wide, you need to be able to support different groups of developers, able to support different number of pipelines, different number of users, etc. So that becomes an important thing. Another thing we want to talk about, another thing is very important for reliability is obviously how do you support and maintain the Spinnaker itself as you grow into multiple deployments. The Spinnaker is great in providing automated releases, obviously from code to deploy. And one of the recurring themes I'm hearing from users is that I want to have a low ceremony process. I want to be able to automate fully. Today, when you want to roll out any update, for example, it takes like human intervention, it takes meetings and outage times to do all of that. So this really helps us this is something, a requirement that people have. The other one that I've seen recurring is around open source mandate. There are certain organizations right now open source first. If I can get an open source, that would be what is preferred over a closed source solution. I think this is something we have seen requirements perspective. I think that from a developer and apps perspective, from a CD requirements perspective, is basically able to do self-serve. Ability to onboard an application quickly so the developers can get up and running and starting deploying applications. The use of tickets and getting different things done is really is sort of not the need anymore. It's basically now people want to more self-serve. Ability to support various types of applications, monolith, microservices, different types of applications, with multiple dependencies built into the applications, so that you can roll out in a staged fashion. That's also another big requirement. I think from a deployment needs perspective, what we are seeing is, obviously multi-cloud is obviously table stakes. There's also need for enterprise legacy environments. We have seen requests for vSphere, for bare metal, and other requirements. At the end of the day, people want to be able to roll out one CD solution, right? You want to be able to do one CD solution so that even if you have an app with multiple components, you want to be able to deploy in one seamless fashion versus, I'm going to do a script for this, I'm going to do this for this. It breaks the whole process. So that's a requirement. Obviously, the whole safe deployment, zero time, seamless rollback is obviously table stakes. The piece that's sort of becoming more evolved, for people who have deployed already, something that they really require is around verification of the deployments at speed. Now that you're deploying at speed, how do I verify these things? And not only for canary analysis, which is one part of it. I've done the canary, but I now want to do blue-green or rolling update analysis because that's sort of the next stage of evolution of analysis. Because the production or the analysis shouldn't stop just because you did the canary and now you're, what works, right? You have seen many cases where you have to do rollbacks because something happens in production that you didn't catch, properly in canary, for example. So the ability to do those analysis also is a very critical one. And we have a session later today where I think one of the customers we're going to talk about, they're going to do a joint session. And like I said, the ability to integrate into Chaos Monkey integration, I think Andy talked about how Chaos Monkey is used for reliable engineering, but how do you measure the reliability? Now that it caused it, the answer should not be, okay, it failed, not failed, but how does the performance is changing with Chaos being introduced, between release over release? How do you measure that in a reliable fashion? I think you're going to have a Chaos session. So how do you, there's a beacon that says, okay, the service failed, right? But you want to be able to be a little bit more granular in terms of analysis. The last part is actually for large enterprises, which is the ability to audit. The good news about Spinnaker is that everything is 100% auditable, right? Every events are stored. You want to be able to, the requirement has been that I want to be able to know who deployed, what they deployed, when they deployed, who approved it, all those things. And that's an important part. Also the policy for, as you go from a small group and now to like 1,000 app users or many apps, the ability to have a centralized policy so that you can enforce all of these policies, IT policies for all the developers in an automated fashion. You don't want to be able to put up blockers everywhere so that people have to call you to do anything, right? And you want to be able to automate the applications. So things around compliance is actually more important, right? You don't want people deploying in the wrong places or people doing things that they're not supposed to do. They're supposed to follow a certain source code analysis, security analysis, etc. before you go to deployment. You don't want people circumventing that. So when you put the Spinnaker with no sort of controls, you may end up with people doing whatever they want to do. And how do you sort of these are the requirements we've heard many times over, and in this talk we'll try to address some of these requirements. How do you go about, like, okay, those are the general requirements. They do Spinnaker. Those are the general requirements. Now, obviously, you can take your existing tools and scripts and Jenkins, CI extensions, etc. to get it. But you're really not going to get the scale or the true CD. It's going to still be broken. You can also look at proprietary tools. There are some tools that are available but it kind of goes against the open source mandate is one of the things that you will see. People have told us. And also, it gets expensive. It's lock-in. Doesn't have the velocity. We think, obviously, we are Spinnaker bigots, so we think that Spinnaker is a great open source tool. It has a high velocity, a lot of contributors, and it's really extensible. And if you look at going back to the enterprise needs, this slide I talked about, many of the Spinnaker checks many of these things, right? There are maybe some additional things that you need to put around it, but the Spinnaker provides the ability to really get all of these benefits. And at Opsimax, what we do is help some of the customers bridge that gap. And for example, some driver, like I have OpenStack, but I have something missing OpenStack. I don't have enterprise vSphere driver. How do I get that? Or how do I do audit? How do I do policy? So again, Spinnaker is the core, and you want to use it. But as you start to roll out, you may need additional things, and we are happy to help you with that. So there's a talk. Obviously, we talked about general requirements. Obviously, there's a large enterprise called Cisco that actually went through this journey, going from CD 1.0 to a Spinnaker 1,500 applications, going to roll out GA in the next 2-3 weeks. So they're going to talk about what lessons they learned. We help them get onto OpenShift. And again, you can learn a lot more in that session as well. So it's at 3:30 today. With that, I'm going to pass it on over to Gopi. He's going to go through a lot of technical details on how to do the design of Spinnaker to meet these requirements.
Thank you, Balaji. So Balaji went through some of the requirements or general requests that you get for the CD 2.0 from enterprises. So now that we decided to go with Spinnaker and meets most of the requirements, how do you go about that? One of the core requirements is zero downtime. Spinnaker is a great microservices architecture. It can span across regions, provides high availability to it. But for an organization, sometimes really large organization, which each department having different needs. So you have a couple of options there. One is to have a centralized system deployed Spinnaker across regions with high availability, but centrally controlled in terms of policy and the kind of features they provide with respect to Spinnaker to entire organization. Or you can have smaller deployments for each one of the departments. Some of them could be because of their compliance, security requirements, or just the ease of use, and give more self-service to those organizations and developers. So in both of these, there are trade-offs, of course. If you are going to give a package to individual organizations, you do have to come up with all the maintenance around it, the upgrades and high availability to those. And you need to really automate how that is done and also provide some kind of a support for extensibility for each groups that are connecting to different cloud providers, for example. And achieving HA is not easy. So Spinnaker uses two different databases, one for the pipelines and applications, and the other one is the execution information events. If you're using something like AWS Elastic Cache, you get automatic high availability through Elastic Cache, but if you're on-premise, then you need to have those built in to provide that availability to them. And some of the small customers say, hey, I don't really need the Redis execution cache, I take this events out. That's an option, but that also requires a lot of work on top for you to do that. In terms of pipeline and application data itself, you can use cloud providers like S3 or Google Storage, which provides you high availability. Or if you're on-premise, you can use Minio, but Minio is a single tenant kind of a database. You again have to do additional work to high availability configurations. So depending on the organization which you want to use, you can go with those. For deploying the Spinnaker itself, Halyard is a great tool. It simplifies lots of the deployment complexities. It allows you to deploy a distributed or a single source to the Kubernetes itself, or you can deploy AWS, a single instance, or distributed, many ways. But for a given organization, you have a bunch of integrations that you do, both in terms of security integration, CI, or the things like notification tools that you have, or SOX compliance. Many of those that needs to be managed, and you cannot really use Halyard to on-the-fly configure all of this. So you need to have some kind of a template mechanism built on top that automates your deployment process. When a department comes and requests an account, then you need to be able to automate some of these based on the requirements in the provider. And OSS versions, with the big community, there are a lot of new features that are coming, and even the bug fixes that are being done. In the last 2 weeks, there are 5 different releases. For the organization to keep up, you need to build your own test capability to pull in the new OS versions and update them. So every organization, because of their integrations, there are some complexities that are specific to those environments. So you need to be able to automate that process. Pull that in, OSS version when a new thing is released, make sure that is working in your environment, and deploy it. So there are some things that you will have to do for the best practices to make sure you have zero downtime. The deployment itself, if you are using Halyard, it does blue-green deployments in a distributed system. That's great, but one of the things that you have to make sure is you provide double the required resource for blue-green. Right? So if you're using 18 GB for the current deployment, you probably have to provide a similar amount for that upgrade. So there are some considerations you need to have. The other ways of doing it, you can do a rolling update, but you have to then script it slightly differently. You could use Halyard for that, but you could use the script is slightly different. Right? And then you have the cloud integrations. Nowadays, most organizations have more than one cloud. And there are differences that are coming in from the features supported by the cloud providers themselves, as well as the Spinnaker level of support for them. For example, AWS, the Fargate or Lambda functions are being introduced. If you're already using them, you will have to wait for those release to come. In Kubernetes, there's a huge support for V2. It supports the entire Kubernetes feature set in V2. But if you're using V1, then you would have something like a blue-green that's in a single stage. Now, if you're using V2, then you have to have multiple stages to achieve the same thing for deployment. I mean, these are some things that are being worked on. They're going to come very quickly, but something to be aware of. For example, OpenStack. In OpenStack, there are certain requirements that you need to have Ceilometer as your monitoring tool if you want to achieve autoscale. But some customers, they don't like Ceilometer. Now they want to use some other monitoring systems like Datadog. Then they would come to us and say, can we do this? Those are kind of things that we provide. And I could go through some of these lists, like the Mesos, Marathon load balancer. There are different load balancers that provide zero downtime, but we only support Marathon. So that's one thing you need to be aware of. And in the user onboarding, again, the security integrations. There are many different types. Spinnaker supports a large number of the variations. Enterprises mostly have LDAP-based Active Directory stuff. And they also have two-factor authentication. Some of the enterprises integrate with identity access management of AWS. So Spinnaker has a lot of different capabilities of those. You need to look at what your enterprise requirements are, what kind of RBAC that you want to provide to the users. You couple that with the Spinnaker deployments to make the decisions on how you want to integrate and how you want to provide security for all access to individual pipelines, who can change the pipeline structure, who can execute them, those kind of things. And some things you need to be careful about is there is this managed service accounts in Spinnaker. Once the pipeline is done, the users can say, what is the role in which this pipeline runs? Once they set it, that's a subset of what their permissions are, but only they can modify from that point on. There are a few things that you need to be aware in those situations. So this is the most exciting part, of course. Now you're ready with all your setup, you're trying to get your applications, your enterprise onboarded, use the applications continuous delivery. So how do you go ahead and have the users migrate to the new system? Spinnaker UI is great. It's very intuitive once you know what to do. So for the beginners, we need to provide them ability to transition from whatever deployments that they are doing today to the new ones. So some of the considerations is gradual transition. Which applications do you use? Spinnaker is great for microservices and immutable servers, right? So you pick and choose those applications that can be easily migrated. Even there, you can have some help with them providing the templates. And you also can do migration tools. If for the microservices or immutable servers, generally there is a configuration that they will go through to deploy. It's always better to consider some kind of a migration tool that takes the existing system that is there and convert them into pipelines. So it's when the users start using the C with Spinnaker, most of their services are already there that can be deployed. The other consideration is usually there are some dependencies in services. There's an order. For example, if you have databases, you want to upgrade the database first and then upgrade the application services. So Spinnaker provides pipeline stages. You could use some of those techniques to say, in my pipeline, big pipeline, I can have pipeline stages that upgrades individual services. One of them could be database. The databases are slightly tricky, but you can have that at the stage with migration, but you need to have a plan to do that. And Spinnaker supports those pipeline stages in the pipeline. And for the new services, once the developers get really used to the system, you want to be able to provide them with templates that are beginner friendly, but also give them the self-service capability where they can extend the pipelines, add new kind of stages in them that maybe use webhook stages or some of the test cases that are extensible that they want to run, sets that one want to use, which can be parameterized. You want to provide that kind of guidance to them and let them use some of those. Last but not least is having the ability to see the improvements in the system that you've done. After all this work, there should be, you should be able to measure and also provide some control on these deployments. So Spinnaker has the ability to collect all the events, who changed what, when, kind of a system. You can hook into the Spinnaker event stream echo and get all the events out, have the database long term. You can build something on top. And for the compliance, you can consider managed pipelines. So these are the pipelines that you lock down, you don't let users manage. And these managed pipelines, they can also be coming from the kit. Once you define the pipeline parameters, the users can change. And if you change the gate, it doesn't automatically reflect in Spinnaker. You build some things in there that gets reflected. New pipeline gets created. So the enterprise, when they decide they want to add a specific stage for some compliance purpose, they can plug it in, run the change, and every user gets that one. And in lockdown pipelines, similar for them. But one of the issues here is these pipelines need to be managed centrally, but self-service, you need to have a different set of pipelines and guidelines for people to use. And the audit rules is again one of the things that you could do. If the pipelines are made some changes and there are some things that you do not want to allow as an you can use the change-based events and then enforce those rules. And last but not least, the automated and continuous verification. Using the keynote, Atlanta has made great strides. Netflix has been using the Atlanta for a while now. It's a great tool for continuous delivery verification. It can check the current and the baseline to the canary deployments and see the performance of each of these metrics. There are some gotchas there that you have to worry about, but in general it looks great. But this requires a special kind of a deployment where you need baseline and canary to be deployed and verified. For smaller customers who don't have a large number of instances running, for them deploying the canary and baseline for the production, it's like doubling their deployment for testing. So there are some techniques that you can use there for those kind of deployments. And you want to be able to extend this also to red blanket deployments. That's also useful for smaller deployment sizes. Today, the Chaos Monkey is designed to use in production. Netflix made amazing strides in that. They can take down an entire availability zone and check. But for most of the organizations, they want to use this first in a test environment to make sure it's all working before they go and make those kind of breaks in production. So there are some tools coming up that allow you to do that. The main issue here is once something is broken, or if you take down an instance, how do you measure what the effect of that is, how long it took to propagate the error, or how resilient the system is? You need to build in those kind of tools. They're plugging in the automated canary kind of the system will give you the insight and what is failing, what's not, those kind of things. The other one is the logs and APM metrics. We generate a bunch of logs, sometimes megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. These logs are mostly looked at only when something goes wrong, and it takes a long time to look at. So in the automated verification, you should also consider having log analysis for the new deployments. You take the logs, some comparison that needs to be done with the existing system that is running. It cannot be simple diff because it's a lot more complex than that.
Can you explain what APM is?
APM tools are application performance monitoring. So these tools, the way they're different from regular monitoring is they provide API level data I know Netflix, with the gateway, they have the API level data, but they also provide you guidance on the transactions, the flow. Then from the gateway to internal services, to database, how they have to work.
These are like Neural Lake and App Dynamics.
Cisco. Yeah. And now let me hand it over to Balaji
Yeah.
to go through some of the
Yeah, I think going back to the previous slide, right? I think the part that's interesting is that if you are doing a rolling update, so Canary is obviously you've done 1% whatever, but really people are with the Kubernetes particularly, right? Istio is becoming very popular, and you want to be able to analyze in a rolling fashion, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. There will be integration, I think, coming with Istio, natively with the Spinnaker, but you want to be able to analyze it and be able to actively control that deployment, be able to fall back, or to revert the version depending on the failure happening. After a certain percentage rollout of the applications. So what OpsumX does, I think it's maybe a little plug for us, is that we do a lot of these things, right? So Panther provides these things, but we provide these logs and APM analysis. We do Istio analysis, we do red flag analysis, etc., etc. So that's sort of where we think if you're deploying at speed, you want to be able to do all of those things to get better analysis. So I think the last but not the least is actually the support of the Spinnaker itself. I think if you're doing internal support, which I think a lot of people are doing, make sure you have some dedicated teams. What I think the challenge obviously is maintaining the team over a period of time. You want to be able to, the team has to be able to support 24/7 if that's your operational model. Particularly if you have developers across the globe, it becomes a very highly challenging situation. And our ability to fix issues, because there are a lot of bugs that you run into, and asking community to fix is going to take a long time, right? I mean it'll take its time, but it's not going to be quick. So you want to be able to have the ability to understand the source code and be able to do the pull request. I guess based on Andy's thing, maybe you want to become an approver yourself. The other part is the support, the commercial support. I think again another plug. OpsumX obviously does open source support. You can when you go with the Spinnaker, you can obviously have vendor versions, so you have vendor specific version. Also just our open source Spinnaker. So you want to choose whichever you feel comfortable. And I think the most vendors like ourselves, we can fix some critical issues for customers. If you have something that's broken, that you're waiting for a community to fix, we can try to help you out. And also there's also features. I think we talked about where end users have come to us and say, I don't have Celometer, I have Datadog, right, for OpenStack, for example. There's nothing there. Or somebody said, hey, I have ECS, but I don't use ECR. I use JFrog for registry. There was no support for that. So these kind of things could be annoying, right? Hey, JFrog is available, artifact support is available for AWS, why is it not available for ECS? Well, the thing is that all of these drivers are developed by individual customers, like end users, like Target did OpenStack and Lookout did ECS. So they have developed it for their use case, right? And it's sort of, they're not doing it for like a global use case for that. So you want to be aware of those things, and I think some of the support vendors could help you with that. I think just to summarize, there's many points that Gopi talked about. We have plenty of time to ask Q&A. I think we left a bit of time so that, because these questions are not, you should ask questions because you're actually trying to deploy Spinnaker and having questions. So please ask them. We can answer for you. At a high level, so you want to be able to have a test environment. Just to summarize, just to have a test environment and validate the Spinnaker before you go to the next version. I think something that we have seen is very useful. But they have an apps onboarding and scaling. You want to be able to provide this self-service concept with beginner and advanced templates. These are something that we have seen work effectively for large organizations where they don't know you. It's a large IT organization and people don't know who you are and stuff like that. From a deployment perspective, like I said, understand the missing features. Make sure that you understand that, as you kind of try to roll out. And definitely, if you're mature enough to gone past the initial deployment stage, you want to consider some sort of verification mechanism, like doing rollout, canary, blue-green, or even staging, or even in production, you want to do a continuous verification of your releases and get back. Like the Chaos Monkey is an example of a sort of production reliability analysis. And for audit and compliance, I think Spinnaker is awesome, and it has all the events available for you to audit. I think this is absolutely a must for any organization going to production. I don't see any people would be not wanting to have that. You have that, but you have to build your own tool, right? Or we can help you. I think the other part is around managed pipelines, which I think is useful, again, to lock down your pipeline, as well as be able to do, if some policy change happens, you're able to actually make a change globally, and then it automatically updates from all the pipelines. Last part we want to do is, okay, now that you've deployed it, you have supposed to have all these benefits. You have business velocity now. You have organizational efficiency, you have reliability, etc. You have obviously reduced cost because you're using open source. But you want to be able to measure some of the successes, right? How do you measure them? These are some of the things some of the clients have done, is basically like, how do I measure deployment success or increased velocity, right? How frequently do I deploy now than before, right? Typically, if you're using scripting and other things, manual judgment, manual verification, those kind of things, you're gonna get a 5 to 10x improvement compared to with Spinnaker, right? And you want to be able to look at how many production failures have reduced now that you're doing this verification piece of it. Like, has your production rollbacks have reduced because you now have less failures, because you're doing better canary analysis and better things. Before, maybe you're using manual judgment, maybe you miss things, users are not robots, they're going to look at all the metrics all the time. Maybe, do figure out, one of the clients that we talked to, they want to reduce like a significant percentage of production failures with this kind of analysis, like significant, like 90 outages, 90 failures per quarter, and like a number of, they want to reduce, that's the goal. And then obviously you want to know how, are you better off now that you have deployed it and now you're able to recover from failure? Another success criteria from a developer perspective is that how fast am I getting onboarded? It used to be like months, whatever, or days, weeks, whatever. Now, it's a good thing for you to go report to your boss and say, hey, you know what, listen, I rolled it out, and now I'm able to get all these benefits. Also, their ability to diagnose production failures, like, for example, ACA is an example of, you have some feedback from the failure that's happening in Canary. With OpsMX, we have these failures for various other stages as well. So we provide you some sort of diagnostic feedback so the developer can say, okay, this failed because of these reasons. So this is something you can see, does it really help a feedback loop between the developers and the deployment? And then obviously your cost reduction could be time saved, could be your licensing costs no longer being there. Those are big factors. One of the clients is spending $1.2 million per year on an IBM products, right? And now they're like, oh wow, this is like 1/10 of the cost, even with the support being there. Nice. And then, Spinnaker success metrics, you want to, obviously, this is more for your own tracking. This is like how reliable is your services, because if it has a downtime, it's going to affect all the users, all the developers. And then ability to sort of keep track of how many applications where you're going to get onboarded at what time. So set some goals. For example, like, hey, I have 1,000 applications, but I want to be able to hit X number of applications by this quarter or that quarter. What can you do to help? The templating may help, maybe the migration tools can help. You can do many things to kind of get that goal, but having that goal is sort of useful for you.